They thought she was alone. They thought a woman in uniform at a deserted gas station would be easy prey. They didn't know about the man filling his truck 3 pumps away. They didn't know he was a Navy SEAL. And they definitely didn't know about his K-9 partner, who had just locked onto their scent. But before we begin this story of courage and loyalty, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. The desert highway stretched endlessly in both directions, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through the barren New Mexico landscape. The sun was setting, painting the distant mesas in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. The air was cooling rapidly, the kind of dramatic temperature shift that only the high desert could deliver. At mile marker 47, the Coyote Pass travel stop sat like a lonely outpost. It was one of those all-in-one facilities, gas station, convenience store, and rest area combined. The fluorescent lights were just beginning to flicker on, fighting against the dying light of day. A single tumbleweed rolled across the empty parking lot, completing the picture of isolation. Ethan Cross sat in his midnight blue F-250, watching the numbers roll on the gas pump. He was a man who looked ordinary at first glance, just another traveler on a long journey. But there was nothing ordinary about him. At 34, Ethan carried himself with the economy of motion that marked a lifetime of tactical training. His dark hair was cropped military short, his jaw shadowed with 3 days of stubble. His gray-green eyes, though currently hidden behind aviator sunglasses as the sun set, held a depth that spoke of things seen and done that most people would never comprehend. He was on leave, driving from his base in California to visit his sister in Texas. It was supposed to be a decompression trip, a chance to let his mind settle after 18 months of deployment that had left him hollow and hypervigilant. The therapist at the VA had suggested mindful travel, whatever that meant. So far, it just meant a lot of highway and a lot of silence. In the passenger seat, taking up more than his fair share of space, was Atlas. The Belgian Malinois was a magnificent specimen of working dog breeding, 85 pounds of lean muscle, intelligent amber eyes, and a tan coat that darkened to black across his face and ears. Unlike the relaxed family dogs visible in passing cars, Atlas sat with perfect posture, his attention fixed forward, his ears rotating like radar dishes, processing every sound within a half-mile radius. Atlas wasn't a pet. He was a partner, a brother in arms, a military working dog who had served 3 deployments alongside Ethan, specializing in explosives detection and tactical support. 6 months ago, they'd both been discharged. Ethan, after taking shrapnel to his left shoulder during an ambush, and Atlas after a roadside IED had left him with hearing damage in his right ear and a slight hitch in his gait. They'd saved each other's lives more times than Ethan could count. Now, they were both trying to figure out what normal looked like. "What do you think, bud?" Ethan said quietly, his voice a low rumble. "Stretch our legs. Maybe grab some jerky that'll probably give us both indigestion." Atlas's tail gave a single thump against the leather seat, his version of enthusiasm. Ethan pulled the nozzle from his tank and replaced it, watching the receipt print. The air smelled of gasoline, creosote, and the peculiar mineral scent of the desert. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of quiet that his therapist said he should embrace. Instead, it made his shoulders tense. In his experience, quiet was when bad things happened. Quiet was when the world held its breath before violence erupted. He shook his head, trying to clear the thought. Not everything was a threat. This was just a gas station, just a stop on a long drive, just a moment of peace. Atlas whined softly, not in distress but in gentle reminder. The dog knew when Ethan was spiraling. "Yeah, I know," Ethan murmured, his hand finding the familiar warmth of Atlas's head. "I'm working on it." He opened the door, and Atlas hopped down with practiced ease, immediately moving to heel position at Ethan's left side. Together, they started toward the convenience store, two warriors trying very hard to be civilians. They had no idea that in less than 3 minutes that peace would shatter. Inside the convenience store, Officer Maya Rodriguez was having the kind of day that made her question her career choices. At 29, Maya was a 7-year veteran of the New Mexico State Police K-9 unit. She was petite, barely 5'4", but she carried herself with the confident bearing of someone who had earned every inch of respect she commanded. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes, though tired, were sharp and observant. The crisp tan and brown uniform she wore was immaculate despite the 14-hour shift she'd just completed. She stood at the counter, fishing through her wallet for cash to pay for a large coffee and a protein bar, her dinner because the nearest actual restaurant was 40 miles away. "Long shift?" the clerk asked. He was an elderly man, probably in his 70s, with kind eyes and weathered hands. "Is there any other kind?" Maya said with a weary smile. "Just covering a route for a colleague who's out sick. I'm usually up near Albuquerque." "Well, you drive safe out there, officer. It gets dark fast, and folks drive crazy on this stretch." "Will do. Thank you, sir." At her feet, lying in a perfect downstay, was her partner, Ranger. Ranger was a 4-year-old German shepherd, 95 pounds of loyal, intelligent muscle. His coat was the classic black and tan, his ears perpetually alert. He'd been with Maya for 2 years, trained in narcotics detection and patrol work. But more than that, he was her constant companion, her protector, and on the long, lonely night shifts, her only conversation partner. Maya had poured everything into this dog. After her divorce 2 years ago, her ex-husband had hated the unpredictable hours and the danger. Ranger had become her anchor. She'd moved into a small house with a yard just for him. She carried his favorite treats in her patrol bag. She talked to him about everything, from case frustrations to her sister's upcoming wedding. "You ready, Rang?" she said softly, pocketing her change. Ranger's tail thumped twice against the linoleum. He stood, shaking out his coat, ready to continue their patrol. They walked out into the cooling desert air. Maya's patrol SUV was parked near the side of the building, its distinctive markings visible in the lot lights. She'd left the windows cracked for airflow, and now she opened the back door to let Ranger jump into his specially designed compartment. "1 more hour," she told him, "and then we're home. I'll even spring for the good dog food tonight." Ranger settled into his space, his eyes tracking her as she closed the door. She walked around to the driver's side, her hand instinctively checking her duty belt. Radio, baton, pepper spray, firearm, everything in place, everything secure. She was a good officer, dedicated, careful. She'd never had a use of force incident, never been injured on duty. She did everything right, but doing everything right doesn't always matter when bad people decide you're their target. As she reached for her door handle, she heard it, the screech of tires on asphalt moving fast, too fast, the aggressive rumble of an engine being pushed hard. She looked up, her hand instinctively moving to her radio, and the world went sideways. The black Dodge Charger came from nowhere, skidding into the gas station lot with the kind of reckless speed that announced bad intentions. It wasn't the vehicle that was alarming. It was the energy it carried, the barely controlled chaos that vibrated from it. Inside were 3 men who had just made the worst decision of their lives. In the driver's seat was Cutter. At 34, he was the leader by virtue of being the oldest and the meanest. He was lean and wiry, his face all sharp angles and cold calculation. His eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, held no warmth. He'd done time, 2 stints for armed robbery and aggravated assault, and he'd learned nothing except how to be smarter about not getting caught. Cutter had been watching this stretch of highway for weeks. He knew the patrol patterns. He knew the gaps. He knew that between 7 and 9 p.m., this section was a dead zone. No backup within 20 minutes. That was all the time he needed. "That's her," Cutter said, his voice flat and emotionless. He'd spotted the state police SUV as they'd passed it, going the opposite direction 5 minutes ago. A lone, female officer at a deserted gas station. Perfect. In the passenger seat was Bones. At 28, he was all nervous energy and twitching aggression. His street name came from his skeletal frame. He was tall, thin, and moved with an unsettling jerky quality. His pupils were dilated, his jaw working constantly. He was high on something, maybe meth, and that made him unpredictable and dangerous. "Why we messin' with a cop?" Bones asked, his fingers drumming frantically on his thigh. "That's heat, man. That's bad heat. She's got a radio, access codes, and probably cash from civil forfeiture stops," Cutter said coldly. "Plus, taking down a cop, that's respect. That's a message." In the back seat was the 3rd man, the Muscle. His street name was Tiny, which was a cruel joke. He was 6'4", and weighed close to 280 pounds, most of it muscle from a decade of prison yard workouts. Tiny didn't talk much. He didn't need to. His presence was communication enough. "What about the dog?" Tiny rumbled, the first words he'd spoken in an hour. "What about it?" Cutter said. "It's in a cage. It can't do nothing." They'd done this before. Not with a cop, but with plenty of other people. Gas station robberies were Cutter's specialty. Hit fast, hit hard, take everything and disappear into the desert before anyone could respond. It was a perfect system. Except this time, they'd added a new element. This time, they were going after someone who could fight back. The Charger screeched to a stop, blocking in the patrol SUV. The doors opened, and all 3 men emerged with the kind of coordinated aggression that spoke of practice. Cutter had a tire iron in his hand, metal, heavy, and brutal. He didn't want to use his gun unless absolutely necessary. Guns meant forensics, meant serious investigations. A beating? That was just assault. That was survivable. Bones pulled a collapsible baton from his jacket, flicking it open with a sharp metallic snap. His eyes were wild, unfocused, scanning for threats that weren't there. Tiny just cracked his knuckles, a sound like small-caliber gunshots in the quiet evening. Maya had 1 second to process what was happening. 1 second to see 3 men advancing on her with weapons. 1 second to make a decision. Her hand went to her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I have a 1033. She never finished the transmission. Cutter moved faster than his lean frame suggested. He closed the distance in 3 strides and swung the tire iron. Maya tried to dodge, tried to bring her arm up to block, but she was half a second too slow. The iron bar connected with her radio, shattering it and sending a shock of pain up her shoulder. She stumbled backward, her hand reaching for her firearm. Bones was on her before she could draw. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it with vicious force. The pain was blinding, immediate. Her fingers went numb, her grip failing. "Where you going, officer?" Cutter hissed, his face close to hers. His breath smelled of cigarettes and rot. "We just want to have a conversation." From inside the patrol SUV, Ranger erupted into a frenzy of barking, deep, aggressive, protective. He threw himself against the reinforced divider, his teeth bared, his entire body vibrating with the need to protect his handler. Cutter looked at the dog and smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "We'll get to you in a minute," he said. And Maya Rodriguez, who had done everything right, realized with cold, terrifying clarity that she was going to die at this gas station. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The first blow came fast and brutal. Cutter swung the tire iron again, this time aiming for Maya's knee. She tried to twist away, but Bones still had her wrist locked in a vice grip. The metal bar connected with the outside of her thigh instead. A glancing blow, but enough to send a lightning bolt of pain through her leg and buckle her stance. She cried out, her training screaming at her to fight, to create distance, to draw her weapon. But there were 3 of them. They were fast, and she was already injured and off balance. "Dispatch," she tried again, reaching for her shoulder mic with her free hand. Tiny moved then, his massive bulk crossing the space in 2 steps. His hand, the size of a dinner plate, clamped down on her shoulder and shoved. The force was tremendous, like being hit by a truck. Maya's feet left the ground. She flew backward, slamming into the side of her patrol SUV with enough force to dent the metal panel. The air exploded from her lungs. Her vision went white with stars. She slid down the side of the vehicle, landing hard on the asphalt. Her hand instinctively went to her duty belt, fumbling for her pepper spray, her baton, anything. But her fingers wouldn't cooperate. The impact had scrambled her nervous system. Inside the SUV, Ranger went ballistic. His barking escalated into something primal, something terrifying. He wasn't just protecting. He was in absolute distress, watching his handler being attacked and unable to reach her. He threw his 95-pound body against the reinforced partition with such force that the entire vehicle rocked. His claws scraped frantically at the metal divider. His teeth snapped at the air. "Shut that dog up," Bones yelled, his voice high and cracking. The sound was getting to him, piercing through his drug-addled haze, triggering something primal in his own brain. "I got it," Tiny said. He walked to the back door of the patrol SUV and peered through the window at Ranger. The dog launched himself at the glass, his teeth bared, his eyes locked on the threat. Tiny didn't flinch. He raised the tire iron that Cutter had handed him. "No!" Maya screamed, finding her voice. Don't touch him!" Tiny brought the tire iron down on the window. The reinforced glass didn't shatter, but it cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across the surface. Ranger's barking intensified, his voice going hoarse. Tiny raised the bar again. "Please," Maya sobbed, trying to push herself up. "Please, don't hurt him." "Then cooperate," Cutter said coldly. He grabbed her by her uniform collar, hauling her to her feet. His face was inches from hers. "Radio codes, now, and your access to the evidence locker back at your station." I don't," Maya stammered. She was trying to buy time, trying to think, but her thoughts were scattered, her head pounding from the impact. Cutter sighed, almost bored. He nodded to Bones. "Persuade her." Bones grinned, his dilated pupils gleaming in the fluorescent lights. He pulled back his baton and swung it into Maya's ribs, Not a killing blow, but enough to make a point. The air rushed out of her lungs in a sharp gasp. She doubled over, coughing, tears streaming down her face. "The codes," Cutter repeated. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." "Cutter, man, we got company," Tiny said suddenly, his voice low and urgent. He was looking across the parking lot. 3 pumps away, a man had just stepped out of his truck. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and he was walking toward them with a stride that was too measured, too controlled. At his side, perfectly healed, was a dog, a massive Belgian Malinois whose entire body had gone rigid, locked onto the scene unfolding at the patrol vehicle. "The hell?" Bones said, his head snapping around. "Where'd he come from?" "Deal with him," Cutter said, not even looking. "Make him mind his business." But across that parking lot, Ethan Cross had already assessed the situation. He'd seen the 3 men surrounding the officer. He'd seen the weapons. He'd heard the woman's cry of pain. And he'd felt Atlas's entire body tense beneath his hand, the dog's training and instincts recognizing a threat situation. Ethan's world had already shifted. The tired veteran on leave was gone, replaced by the operator. His breathing had slowed, his heart rate had dropped to its combat rhythm, and his mind had become a tactical processor, running calculations at lightning speed. Threat assessment: 3 hostiles, 1 with tire iron, 1 with baton, 1 unarmed but massive. Victim: female officer, injured, on ground. A secondary victim: K9 in vehicle, in distress. Civilians: none visible. Backup: none visible. Environmental factors: open parking lot, limited cover, setting sun creating visibility issues. Tactical options: direct engagement, high risk to officer. Call 911, response time minimum 15 minutes, officer may not survive. Create distraction, possible but unpredictable. Precision intervention, highest probability of success. The decision was made in microseconds. Ethan's hand had moved to the small of his back, where his EDC Springfield Hellcat 9mm sat in its concealed holster. He was licensed to carry in New Mexico, had been trained since he was 18, and had fired more rounds in combat than most people would shoot in 10 lifetimes. But pulling a weapon in a public space, even a deserted one, was a line. It meant legal complications, investigations, and the possibility of collateral damage. There was another option. He looked down at Atlas. The dog was trembling, not with fear, but with barely restrained aggression. Every line of his body was coiled, ready. His lips had pulled back from his teeth in a silent snarl. He'd heard Rangers' distress calls, recognized a fellow working dog in danger, and every instinct in his body was screaming at him to engage. Ethan's hand moved to the release on Atlas's tactical collar, a specialized piece of equipment that held a built-in handle for control and could be removed in seconds. "Not yet, bud," Ethan murmured, his voice so low only the dog could hear. "Wait for it." He started walking toward them. His pace was unhurried, his body language relaxed, but his eyes were those of a predator sizing up prey. Bones saw him coming and moved to intercept, the baton swinging loosely at his side. "Hey, man," Bones called out, his voice aggressive but tinged with nervousness. "This doesn't concern you. Keep walking." Ethan didn't stop. He kept coming, closing the distance to 40 feet, then 30. "I said, keep walking," Bones screamed, his high pitch cracking. He raised the baton, trying to look threatening. Ethan stopped at 20 feet. He looked past Bones to the woman on the ground, taking in her injuries, her desperation. He looked at the patrol SUV, where Ranger was still throwing himself against the partition, his voice raw and desperate. And then Ethan looked directly at Cutter, the leader, the one whose cold eyes betrayed no fear, only calculation. "Let her go," Ethan said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind of voice that had commanded men in combat, the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. "Walk away now, and this ends without anyone getting hurt." For a brief second, the parking lot held its breath. Then Cutter laughed. It was a harsh, mocking sound. "You got a death wish, hero?" Ethan's expression didn't change. Last chance. Bones, his nerves already frayed, his judgment destroyed by whatever was coursing through his system, made the decision. He charged, the baton raised high, screaming a wordless battle cry. And that was when everything went to hell. The moment Bones committed to his charge, Ethan's world slowed down. It wasn't an adrenaline dump. He was too well trained for that. Instead, his perception shifted into what operators called tactical time. Everything seemed to move at half speed, giving him an eternity to process, to calculate, to execute. Bones was 15 feet away, closing fast. His baton was raised for an overhead strike, a wild, untrained attack that left his entire body exposed. His weight was forward, unbalanced. His eyes were wide, telegraphing his intention. He was running on fear and chemicals, not skill. Threat level, minimal. Tactical value, none. Decision, neutralize and advance. Ethan didn't move until Bones was within 6 feet. Then he pivoted, precise rotation of his hips and shoulders that moved his body offline from the attack path while keeping Atlas safely out of range. Bones's momentum carried him past, his baton cutting through empty air. Ethan's right hand shot out, not in a punch, but in a precision strike. His palm heel connected with the base of Bones's jaw, a technique designed to maximize force transfer while minimizing injury to the striker's hand. The blow snapped Bones's head back, disrupting the vestibular system and severing the connection between his brain and his body. Bones's legs gave out mid-stride. He crumpled, the baton clattering from his nerveless fingers as he hit the asphalt face first. He didn't move. He was breathing. Ethan had been precise about that. But he was done fighting. Time elapsed, 1.2 seconds. Cutter's expression shifted. The mockery was gone, replaced by cold calculation. He was reassessing the threat. This wasn't a random Good Samaritan. This was someone with training. "Tiny," Cutter said, his voice flat. The massive man needed no further instruction. He stepped away from the patrol SUV and advanced on Ethan with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of using his size to intimidate. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. He was 6'4", and 280 pounds of prison yard muscle. "That was a mistake," Tiny rumbled, cracking his knuckles. "Big mistake." Ethan said nothing. His hands remained at his sides, his posture relaxed. But his eyes, they were locked onto Tiny with the kind of focus that would have warned anyone with combat experience that they were making a terrible error in judgment. Atlas, still healed at Ethan's left side, was vibrating with barely contained aggression. His ears were pinned back, his teeth bared in a silent snarl. A low, rumbling growl was building in his chest. Tiny reached Ethan and threw a haymaker, a huge, looping right hand that carried all his body weight behind it. If it connected, it would have been devastating. It didn't connect. Ethan moved inside the punch, stepping forward and to the right. The massive fist whistled past his left ear, so close he felt the air displacement. In the same fluid motion, Ethan's left hand trapped Tiny's extended wrist, while his right hand drove forward, striking the back of Tiny's elbow with devastating precision. The joint hyperextended with an audible crack. Tiny's roar of pain was immediate and visceral, but Ethan wasn't done. Using Tiny's own momentum against him, Ethan pivoted, using the trapped arm as a lever. He swept Tiny's leg with his own, and the giant man, suddenly off balance and working with only one arm, toppled. He hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, Ethan had dropped to one knee, his body weight driving into the pressure point at Tiny's shoulder. Tiny's free hand scrabbled at the asphalt, trying to find purchase, but Ethan had positional control. It was over. Time elapsed, 3.8 seconds. "Don't move," Ethan said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Tiny, his face pressed against the asphalt, his arm screaming in agony, went still. From the patrol SUV, Maya watched in stunned disbelief. One moment, she'd been convinced she was going to die at this gas station. The next, a stranger had appeared and neutralized two threats in less than 5 seconds. Her mind, still scrambling from the trauma and the pain, couldn't process what she was seeing. "Who?" she whispered, her voice raw. Ethan didn't look at her. His attention was locked on the third man, Cutter, who hadn't moved from his position by the patrol SUV. Cutter still held the tire iron, but his body language had changed. The cocky aggression was gone. Now he looked like what he was, a predator who had just realized he was facing something higher on the food chain. "Your friends are down," Ethan said, his voice calm and even. "You have two choices. You can walk away, or you can join them. Choose fast." For a long moment, Cutter didn't move. His knuckles were white around the tire iron. His eyes darted to Bones, unconscious on the ground, to Tiny, pinned and neutralized, and then to the man standing between him and escape. And that was when Cutter made his decision. Instead of running, instead of surrendering, he did the one thing that turned this from a fight into something far more dangerous. He turned toward Maya, raised the tire iron, and moved to finish what he'd started. "Bad choice," Ethan said, and he gave the command he'd been holding back. "Atlas, fast." The German word, meaning attack, was the trigger Atlas had been waiting for. The Belgian Malinois exploded forward like a missile, covering the 15 feet to Cutter in less than a second. His jaws open, his eyes locked on the target. The real fight was about to begin. Cutter heard the sound before he saw the dog, a low, tearing growl that cut through the air like a chainsaw. He spun, the tire iron raised, his eyes going wide as 85 pounds of trained military working dog launched itself at him. Atlas didn't go for the body. He went for the arm, specifically the arm holding the weapon. It was textbook K9 training. Neutralize the threat first. His jaws clamped down on Cutter's forearm with over 700 pounds of pressure per square inch, the kind of bite force that could crush bone. Cutter screamed. It was a high, terrible sound, full of shock and agony. The tire iron clattered from his hand, hitting the asphalt with a metallic clang. Atlas didn't release. He maintained his grip, his powerful neck muscles shaking his head in a controlled, devastating motion that further damaged the limb. "Get it off! Get it off me!" Cutter shrieked, trying to pull away, but that only made it worse. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through his arm. "Atlas, ouse!" Ethan commanded. The dog released instantly, backing away but remaining in a ready stance, his eyes locked on Cutter. Cutter stumbled backward, clutching his mangled arm to his chest. Blood was seeping between his fingers. His face was a mask of pain and shock. You can't. I'll sue. That's assault with a deadly weapon." Ethan walked forward slowly, his movements measured. He bent down and picked up the tire iron, examining it briefly before tossing it far out of reach. Then he looked at Cutter with an expression of complete calm. "You attacked a police officer," Ethan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You were about to commit murder. My K-9 partner neutralized an active threat. That's not assault. That's a good dog doing his job." Cutter was shaking now, not just from pain, but from fear. The situation had completely reversed. He was bleeding, disarmed, and facing a man who moved like death itself. "I'm done," Cutter gasped. "I'm done. I give up." "Get on the ground," Ethan ordered. "Face down. Hands behind your back. Do it now." Cutter complied, sinking to his knees and then to his stomach, his injured arm making the position excruciating. But he did it. The fight was gone. Ethan looked over at Maya, who was still slumped against her patrol vehicle, her eyes wide with shock. "Officer, are you okay?" Maya nodded weakly. Yes, I think so." "Your radio's destroyed. Do you have a backup? We need EMTs and backup units." In the vehicle, center console." Ethan moved to the driver's side door, opening it and retrieving the backup radio. Behind him, Atlas had positioned himself between the downed suspects and Maya, his body a living barrier. As Ethan keyed the mic, his voice was steady and professional. "This is a civilian at Coyote Pass travel stop, mile marker 47. Officer needs assistance. 3 suspects in custody. Need ambulance and backup units. Situation is secure." The dispatcher's voice crackled back, shocked and urgent. "Copy that. Units en route. ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes. In 12 minutes this would all be over. But first they had to make sure everyone stayed alive that long. The desert evening had gone completely silent. Even the wind had stopped, leaving only the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station and the heavy breathing of injured men. Ethan stood in the center of the parking lot, the backup radio in one hand, his other hand resting on the top of Atlas's head. The dog was still in full alert mode, his amber eyes tracking every movement of the 3 downed suspects. Bones was beginning to stir, groaning softly as consciousness returned. Tiny was still pinned by pain, his broken arm cradled against his chest. And Cutter lay face down on the asphalt, his injured arm leaving a slowly expanding pool of blood beneath him. "Officer Rodriguez," Ethan said, his voice calm but commanding. "I need you to stay alert. Can you do that?" Maya nodded, though her face was pale and her breathing shallow. She was cradling her ribs where Bones had struck her with the baton. "Yeah, I'm okay." She wasn't okay. Ethan could see that. She had the glassy-eyed look of someone in shock, someone whose body was running on adrenaline and would crash hard once it wore off. But she was conscious, and that was enough. "Help is coming," Ethan said. 12 minutes. Inside the patrol SUV, Ranger had finally stopped his frantic assault on the partition. The dog was panting heavily, his voice hoarse from barking, but his eyes were locked on Maya through the cracked window. He whined, a soft, desperate sound of concern for his handler. Maya turned her head toward the sound. "Ranger," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's okay, boy. I'm okay." But she wasn't convincing anyone, least of all her dog. Ethan started to move toward her, intending to help her to a sitting position, when Atlas's body language changed. The dog's ears snapped forward, his head turning toward the convenience store. A low growl began building in his chest. Ethan froze. That growl meant one thing, another threat. He turned, his body automatically shifting into a defensive stance, and saw him. The elderly clerk, the kind man who had been working the register, was standing in the doorway of the store. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, barely visible in the shadows, was a fourth man. No, not a fourth man, a fourth suspect. The realization hit Ethan like ice water. 3 suspects in custody. But the Charger could seat 5. He'd been so focused on the immediate threats that he hadn't cleared the vehicle. Tactical error, potentially fatal. The fourth man was younger than the others, maybe 25, with a lean, hungry look and wild eyes. He had the clerk in a chokehold, and in his other hand, pressed against the old man's temple, was a snub-nosed revolver. "Nobody move," the fourth man screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "Nobody moves or I blow his head off." The clerk's eyes were wide with terror, his weathered hands clutching uselessly at the arm across his throat. Tactical reassessment. Fourth suspect, armed with firearm. Hostage situation. Distance, approximately 50 feet. Clear shot, negative. Hostage in line of fire. Environmental factors. Glass storefront behind suspect. Multiple angles of potential ricochet. Decision, de-escalation required. "Easy," Ethan said, raising his free hand in a calming gesture. His voice dropped into what operators called command tone. Low, steady, authoritative, without being aggressive. "Nobody needs to get hurt here." "Shut up!" the fourth man shrieked. He jerked the clerk roughly, making the old man gasp. "Where's Cutter? What did you do to my brother?" Brother. That explained the fourth man's presence. It also made him exponentially more dangerous. Family loyalty meant unpredictability. "Cutter's alive," Ethan said, keeping his voice level. "He's injured, but he's alive. Everyone's alive. That's a good thing. Let's keep it that way." "Dex!" Cutter's voice came from the ground, weak and strained. "Dex, get out of here. Run!" But Dex wasn't running. His eyes, red-rimmed and wild, were locked on his brother, lying in a pool of blood. "What did you do to him?" he demanded, his voice rising to a scream. "What did you do?" "He attacked a police officer," Ethan said calmly. "I stopped him. Now he needs medical attention, and so does she. The police are coming. The best thing you can do for your brother is put down that gun and let the paramedics work." "No!" Dex shook his head violently, his grip on the clerk tightening. "No, I'm getting him out of here. We're leaving, all of us." "That's not going to happen," Ethan said. There was no threat in his voice, just statement of fact. "You fire that weapon, you're looking at murder 1. Right now, this is assault, maybe armed robbery. You can survive that. But you pull that trigger, your life is over." For a moment, Dex wavered. Ethan could see the conflict in his eyes, the fear warring with desperation. Then Cutter made a mistake. "Dex, shoot him! Shoot the dog! Just shoot—" "Quiet!" Ethan snapped, his voice like a whip crack. Cutter flinched and went silent, but the damage was done. Dex's fear had curdled into rage. His finger tightened on the trigger. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the clerk, and Ethan knew with absolute certainty that Dex was about to kill that old man. He had one option, one chance. His right hand, which had been resting on Atlas's head, shifted to the dog's collar. His left hand dropped the radio and moved to the concealed holster at his back. The movements were fluid, practiced thousands of times. "Atlas, such verloren." The command was in German. Search and find. It was a command that released Atlas from protection mode and into tracking mode. A command that would send the dog racing toward the store, but not engage. A distraction, not an attack. Atlas shot forward like a rocket. his paws eating up the 50 feet of asphalt in seconds. The sudden movement drew Dex's attention. His eyes widened, the gun swinging away from the clerk and toward the incoming dog. In that microsecond, that fraction of a moment when the gun was no longer pointed at the hostage, Ethan drew. The Springfield Hellcat came out of its holster in a smooth, practiced motion. His stance was textbook, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, both hands on the weapon, right index finger moving from the frame to the trigger. Target acquisition, hostile, armed, 50 feet, hostage clear, wind, minimal, light, artificial, adequate. Background, glass storefront, civilian area beyond. Shot selection, high center mass. Reason, largest target area, lowest risk of hostage strike, highest probability of incapacitation. Ethan's breathing had slowed to almost nothing. His heart rate was controlled. The world had narrowed to the front sight post of his weapon and the man behind it. He fired once. The gunshot was shockingly loud in the quiet evening, a sharp crack that echoed off the desert mesas. The 9mm hollow point round covered the 50 feet in less than a tenth of a second. It struck Dex in the center of his chest, just below the sternum. The impact was immediate. Dex's body jerked backward, his arms flying wide. The revolver fell from his hand, clattering harmlessly on the concrete. He stumbled, hitting the glass door of the convenience store, then slid down, leaving a red smear on the glass. The clerk, suddenly released, stumbled forward and collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Atlas, having reached the store, immediately shifted his focus. He didn't approach the downed suspect. Instead, he positioned himself between the clerk and Dex, a protective barrier. Ethan kept his weapon trained on Dex, advancing slowly, his movements controlled. As he got closer, he could see the man's chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. The shot had been precise, devastating but not immediately fatal. Dex was incapacitated. "Don't move," Ethan said, though the command was unnecessary. Dex couldn't move. His eyes were wide with shock, his hands weakly clutching at his chest. Ethan kicked the revolver away, sending it skittering across the parking lot. Then he knelt beside the clerk. "Sir, are you injured?" The elderly man shook his head, tears streaming down his weathered face. No, thank you. Oh, God, thank you." "Stay here," Ethan instructed. "Help is coming." He straightened, his weapon still in hand but lowered to low-ready position. He turned back toward the patrol SUV, where Maya was staring at him with an expression of complete disbelief. In the distance, the first wail of sirens was finally audible. Help was coming. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. The sirens grew louder, multiple units converging on the scene. Within 2 minutes, the quiet gas station had transformed into a law enforcement staging area. 3 New Mexico State Police cruisers, lights blazing, formed a perimeter. A 4th vehicle, an unmarked SUV, screeched to a stop, and out stepped a woman in her 50s wearing a sergeant's insignia. Sergeant Linda Morales had been 20 miles away when the call came through. She was Maya Rodriguez's supervisor, and the words "officer needs assistance" had sent ice through her veins. Now she was taking in the scene. 3 suspects on the ground, 1 bleeding heavily. A 4th suspect down by the store with what was clearly a gunshot wound. Her officer, Maya, sitting against her patrol vehicle with visible injuries, and standing in the center of it all, A tall man in civilian clothes with a handgun held in low-ready position and a Belgian Malinois at his side. "Weapon down, now!" Morales commanded, her own hand moving to her holster. "Sergeant," Maya called out, her voice weak but urgent. "Wait. He saved my life." Ethan had already anticipated this. The moment the first cruiser had arrived, he'd begun the careful process of making himself non-threatening. He engaged the safety on his Springfield, dropped the magazine, racked the slide to eject the chambered round, and set the empty weapon on the ground. Then he raised both hands slowly and visibly. "Ethan Cross," he said calmly, "former Navy SEAL. I'm licensed to carry. I witnessed the assault on your officer and intervened. 4 suspects total. 3 are secure. 1 is shot and needs immediate medical attention. The elderly clerk inside is shaken but uninjured." Morales's eyes narrowed. She processed the information quickly, her gaze flicking to Maya for confirmation. "It's true," Maya said, her voice gaining strength. They were going to kill me, Sarge. All 3 of them." He stopped them. He and his dog. She looked at Ethan, and there was something like awe in her expression. "I've never seen anything like it. He took down 3 men in seconds." 4, Ethan corrected quietly. "The 4th one had a hostage." Morales's expression shifted from suspicion to understanding. She'd been in law enforcement for 28 years. She knew what a tactical intervention looked like. She also knew that civilians didn't usually have that kind of training. "Navy SEAL," she repeated, her voice thoughtful. She walked closer to Ethan, studying him. "Active duty?" "Retired 6 months ago." "And your K-9? "Atlas, former military working dog. Explosives detection and tactical support. 3 deployments." Morales looked at Atlas, who sat perfectly still in a heel position, his intelligent eyes tracking her movements. The dog's discipline was unmistakable. "Stand down," Morales said to her officers who had their weapons drawn. "This man is not a threat." She turned back to Ethan. "Mr. Cross, I'm going to need a very detailed statement." "Yes, ma'am." Paramedics were already swarming the scene. 2 teams were working on decks whose breathing was growing more labored. Another team was assessing Cutter's injuries, while a third was checking on Maya. One of the paramedics, a young man with kind eyes, knelt beside Maya. "Officer Rodriguez, we need to get you to the hospital. You likely have fractured ribs, and I want to rule out internal bleeding." "I'm fine," Maya protested weakly. "You're not fine," the paramedic said gently, "and your dog needs you to be okay, so let us help." At the mention of Ranger, Maya's resistance crumbled. "Okay," she whispered. As they prepared to move her to the ambulance, Maya looked across the parking lot to where Ethan stood, giving his statement to Sergeant Morales. "Wait," she said. "Please, I need to thank him." The paramedic helped her stand, supporting her weight as she limped over to Ethan. "Mr. Cross," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan turned, his expression softening when he saw her condition. "You should be sitting down, officer." "I needed to say thank you," Maya said, tears welling in her eyes. I thought I was gonna die. I thought they were going to kill Ranger. And you?" Her voice broke. "You didn't have to help. You could have driven away." Ethan shook his head. "No, I couldn't. I saw someone in trouble. I had the training to help. There was no choice." "There's always a choice," Maya said. "You chose to be a hero." "I'm not a hero," Ethan said quietly. "I'm just a guy who has a very well-trained dog." As if on cue, Atlas walked over to Maya, His demeanor completely changed from the aggressive warrior of minutes before. He sat in front of her and offered his paw, a gesture of peace. Maya laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and tears. She took the paw, shaking it gently. "Thank you," she whispered to the dog. "Thank you for saving me." From the patrol SUV, Ranger gave a soft woof, not aggressive, but acknowledging. One warrior to another. Sergeant Morales watched the exchange, and something in her weathered face softened. "Get Officer Rodriguez to the hospital," she ordered the paramedics. Then she looked at Ethan. "You're going to have a long night ahead of you, Mr. Cross, but I want you to know, you did good work here, real good work." Ethan nodded, accepting the praise with quiet dignity. As Maya was loaded into the ambulance, she took one last look at the man who had saved her life. Their eyes met across the chaos, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. The kind of unspoken bond that forms between people who have survived violence together. Then the ambulance doors closed, and she was gone. The immediate chaos began to subside. The 4 suspects were in custody, 3 in the back of patrol cars, 1 en route to the hospital under armed guard. The elderly clerk had been checked by paramedics and was given his statement to an officer, still shaken but unharmed. Ethan stood by his truck, Atlas once again at his side, watching the organized chaos of a law enforcement scene. He'd given his preliminary statement to Sergeant Morales, surrendered his weapon for forensic testing, and provided his license to carry and military ID. Now came the waiting, the endless bureaucratic aftermath that always followed a shooting. A young officer approached, his nameplate reading Chen. He looked barely old enough to shave, but his eyes held a maturity that spoke of hard lessons learned quickly. "Mr. Cross, Sergeant Morales asked me to let you know that Officer Rodriguez is stable. They're taking her to University Hospital in Albuquerque. She's going to be okay." Chen paused, then added, "And she wanted me to tell you something." Ethan looked up. "What's that?" "She said to tell you that Ranger, that's her canine, wants to meet Atlas properly. When this is all over, if you're still in the area, she'd like to buy you a coffee and let the dogs be friends." Despite the tension of the evening, Ethan felt a small smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "Tell her I'd like that." Chen nodded, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something, sir?" "Go ahead. How did you stay so calm? Mean, 4 guys, weapons, a hostage situation, and you just handled it like it was nothing." Ethan looked at the young officer, seeing in him the same raw eagerness he'd once had, back when the world seemed simpler and courage felt like fearlessness. "It wasn't nothing," Ethan said quietly. "Every second of that was terrifying. But I had training, and I had a partner I trust more than anyone in the world." He put his hand on Atlas's head. "The calm comes from knowing you've prepared for the worst, and the courage comes from knowing that someone needs help and you have the ability to give it." Chen absorbed that, nodding slowly. "Thank you, sir, for helping her. Maya, Officer Rodriguez, she's one of the good ones." "I could tell," Ethan said. As Chen walked away, Ethan looked down at Atlas. The dog's ears were relaxed now, his tail given a slow, tired wag. The adrenaline was wearing off, and Atlas was beginning to feel the strain of the engagement. "Come on, bud," Ethan said softly. "Let's get you some water." He opened the truck and pulled out Atlas's collapsible water bowl, filling it from a bottle. The dog drank deeply, his tail continuing its slow rhythm. They had done good work tonight. Hard work. The kind of work that reminded Ethan why he'd spent his entire adult life preparing for moments like this. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because when the moment came, when someone needed help and no one else was there, he could be the difference between life and death. And that, he thought, was what it meant to serve. 3 hours later, Ethan sat in an interview room at the New Mexico State Police substation in Albuquerque. The room was sterile and institutional. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor, and 2 chairs that looked like they'd been uncomfortable since the Reagan administration. Sergeant Morales sat across from him, a thick folder open on the table between them. She'd been professional throughout his statement, asking pointed questions about the timeline, his actions, his decision to fire his weapon. Now, as the official interview wound down, her demeanor shifted slightly. "Mr. Cross, I need to tell you something off the record," she said, her voice low. Ethan's attention sharpened. "I'm listening. The 4 men you stopped tonight, they're not just random criminals. They're part of something bigger." She flipped open the folder, revealing photographs and police reports. "Cutter and Dex Wolf. They're brothers, like you figured out. But what we didn't know until tonight is that they're part of a larger crew that's been hitting law enforcement targets up and down I-25 for the past 3 months. Ethan leaned forward, studying the documents. There were crime scene photos, incident reports, and victim statements. His expression darkened as he read. "They've been targeting lone officers," Morales continued. "Specifically, K-9 officers. 4 incidents before tonight. 2 officers hospitalized with severe injuries. 1 K-9 killed." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Killed?" "Shot during an assault on his handler. The officer survived, but the dog didn't." Morales' voice was heavy. "That's why Maya's situation was so critical. These guys aren't just robbers. They have a specific hatred for law enforcement, and especially for K-9 units." "Do you know why?" Morales shook her head. "We're still putting it together. But I talked to the detective who's been working these cases. He thinks it's personal. Cutter did time at Santa Fe Correctional. While he was inside, he was attacked by a K-9 during a riot. Left him with permanent nerve damage in his left leg." "So, this is revenge," Ethan said quietly. "That's the theory. And here's the thing. We think there are more of them. Cutter and Dex are part of a crew of at least 6 to 8 men. The others are still out there." Ethan absorbed this information, his tactical mind already processing the implications. "You think they'll retaliate?" "I think they're going to be very unhappy that their operation got disrupted," Morales said. "Cutter was the leader. With him in custody, the crew is fractured, but that makes them unpredictable. Desperate." "What about Officer Rodriguez?" "She's going to be in the hospital for at least 2 days. Then she'll be on medical leave for at least a month while she recovers. That puts her out of the line of fire, which is good. But," Morales paused, choosing her words carefully, "but she's a witness, and so are you. And right now, I have a crew of violent criminals who know that their leader got taken down by a civilian and a retired military dog." "You think they'll come after me?" Ethan said. It wasn't a question. "I think it's a possibility. I want you to be careful, Mr. Cross. These men are dangerous and they have nothing left to lose." Ethan nodded slowly. "I appreciate the warning, Sergeant." Morales closed the folder. "Your weapon will be returned to you in 72 hours, after forensics completes their analysis. But for what it's worth, this looks like a clean shoot. You saved multiple lives tonight. The clerk, Officer Rodriguez, and probably half a dozen future victims who would have crossed paths with these men." "I was just in the right place," Ethan said. "You were in the right place with the right training," Morales corrected. "That's not luck. That's providence." Ethan stood, and Morales did the same. They shook hands, and there was a mutual respect in the gesture, two warriors acknowledging each other. "If you need anything," Morales said, "or if you see anything suspicious, you call me directly." She handed him a business card with her cell phone number written on the back. "Day or night?" "Yes, ma'am." As Ethan left the station, Atlas walking beside him, his mind was already working through the tactical problem. He'd planned to continue his drive to Texas, to spend a week with his sister and try to pretend he was a normal person living a normal life. But normal people didn't get targeted by violent criminal organizations. Normal people didn't have to worry about retaliation for doing the right thing. And Ethan Cross, despite his best efforts, was discovering that he could never truly be normal. He reached his truck and opened the passenger door for Atlas. The dog hopped in, settling into his seat with a tired sigh. As Ethan walked around to the driver's side, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Cross? Mr. Cross? This is Dr. Sarah Chen from University Hospital. I'm calling about Officer Maya Rodriguez." Ethan's heart rate picked up. "Is she okay?" "She's stable and doing well, but she specifically asked me to call you. She wanted you to know that she and Ranger are both going to be fine, and she wanted to thank you again." There was a pause. "She also said that when you come to visit, you should bring Atlas. Apparently, Ranger has been asking about him." Despite the weight of everything, the shooting, the threat of retaliation, the disruption of his carefully planned decompression, Ethan smiled. "Tell her I'll be there tomorrow," he said. "I will. And Mr. Cross, thank you, from all of us. What you did tonight, you're a hero." "I'm really not," Ethan said quietly, "but I appreciate you saying so." He ended the call and sat in his truck for a long moment, staring out at the dark New Mexico sky. Somewhere out there, dangerous men were regrouping, planning, plotting revenge, and he'd just put himself directly in their crosshairs. The smart thing would be to leave, to drive away, to disappear, to let law enforcement handle it. But as he looked at Atlas, who was watching him with those intelligent amber eyes, Ethan knew he wasn't going anywhere. He'd started this fight, and he was going to see it through. "Looks like we're staying a while longer, bud," Ethan said, scratching behind Atlas's ears. The dog's tail thumped once in acknowledgement. They were in this together, just like always. The next morning, Ethan checked into a modest motel on the outskirts of Albuquerque. It was the kind of place that asked no questions and accepted cash, with a ground floor room that had a clear view of the parking lot and 2 exits. Old habits died hard. After settling Atlas with food and water, Ethan made the drive to University Hospital. He found Maya in a private room on the 4th floor, her ribs wrapped, her face still bearing the bruises from the assault, but her eyes clear and alert. Ranger lay on a special mat on the floor beside her bed. The German shepherd's tail began wagging the moment Ethan and Atlas entered the room. "You came," Maya said, her face breaking into a smile despite the obvious pain it caused. "I said I would," Ethan replied. He gestured to Atlas, and someone wanted to properly introduce himself. Maya laughed softly, then winced. "Ranger has been impossible. The nurses keep trying to tell him he needs to rest, but he won't settle. I think he's been worried." Ethan looked at the 2 dogs. Ranger was watching Atlas with intense interest, his posture alert but not aggressive. Atlas, for his part, was sitting calmly, waiting for permission. Atlas Vrienden, Ethan said, the Dutch command for friends. Atlas walked forward slowly, approaching Ranger with the careful body language of a dog trained to read situations. Ranger stood, his tail wagging more enthusiastically. They touched noses, then began the ritual sniffing that dogs use to communicate volumes of information. Within moments, Ranger's entire demeanor changed. The tension left his body. His tail went from a nervous wag to a full, happy rhythm. These weren't just dogs meeting. These were two working canines recognizing each other, acknowledging shared experience and shared purpose. They like each other, Maya said softly, watching the interaction with obvious relief. Atlas has good judgment, Ethan said. If he likes Ranger, then Ranger's good people. Maya's expression grew more serious. Sergeant Morales told me about the crew, about the other attacks. I figured she would. She also told me that you might be in danger, because you helped me. Ethan shrugged. I'm always in danger, comes with the territory. This is different, Maya insisted. This is my fault. You got involved because of me. I got involved because 3 men were attacking a police officer, Ethan corrected gently. And I'd do it again. Every time. So would Atlas. Maya looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head in wonder. Who are you, really? What kind of person just does what you did? The kind who's been trained for it, Ethan said simply. I spent 15 years preparing for moments like that. It would be a waste not to use that training when it's needed. Before Maya could respond, there was a knock on the door. Sergeant Morales entered, followed by a man in his 40s wearing a detective's badge. Officer Rodriguez. Mr. Cross, Morales said. This is Detective Frank Morrison. He's been working the task force on the crew that attacked you. Morrison shook hands with both of them, his grip firm and his eyes shrewd. Mr. Cross, I've been reading the reports from last night. Impressive work. Just did what needed doing, Ethan said. Well, what needed doing broke this case wide open, Morrison said. He pulled out a tablet, showing them a series of photographs. The 4 men you stopped last night, they're singing, especially the younger brother, Dex. He's looking at attempted murder charges, and he's decided his best option is cooperation. What did he tell you? Maya asked. Everything, Morrison said. The crew is 8 men total. The 4 you encountered plus 4 more. They've been running a coordinated campaign targeting lone officers, specifically K-9 units, up and down the I-25 corridor. They'd scout locations, identify officers who worked alone, and hit them during shift changes or at isolated locations. Revenge operation, Ethan said. Exactly. Cutter has a pathological hatred of law enforcement, especially K-9 units. After his experience in prison, he decided to build a crew specifically to strike back. They've been escalating. First, it was just harassment and vandalism, then assaults, then attempted murder. What about the others? Maya asked. The 4 who weren't at the gas station. That's why I'm here, Morrison said. We have names, descriptions, and last known addresses. We're moving to pick them up today. But I wanted to warn you both. There's a possibility they've already heard about what happened, and if they have, they might be looking for payback. Ethan had expected this. What's your recommendation? For Officer Rodriguez, she's safe here in the hospital with security. After discharge, we'll have a detail on her house until the crew is rounded up. Morrison turned to Ethan. For you, Mr. Cross, I strongly suggest you leave the area. These men are dangerous and you're now a priority target. I'm not leaving, Ethan said simply. Morrison blinked. "Mr. Cross, I don't think you understand." "I understand perfectly," Ethan interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "I understand that these men are predators who target law enforcement officers. I understand that they've already hurt people and killed a K-9, and I understand that I have training and experience that could be useful in stopping them." "You're a civilian," Morrison protested. "I'm a trained operator with a combat-experienced K-9 partner," Ethan corrected, "and I'm volunteering to help. Use me." Morrison looked at Morales, who gave a slight shrug. "He's got a point, Frank, and we could use the help." "This is highly irregular," Morrison muttered. "So is a crew of criminals specifically targeting cops," Ethan said. "Sometimes irregular problems require irregular solutions." Morrison studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, but you follow my lead. You don't take unnecessary risks, and if I tell you to back off, you back off. Clear?" "Crystal," Ethan said. As they began planning the operation to round up the remaining crew members, Ethan looked down at Atlas and Ranger, who had settled side by side on the floor, both dogs watching the humans with intelligent, knowing eyes. This was what they'd been trained for, what they'd been built for. And now they were going hunting. The takedown happened 36 hours later in a rundown trailer park on the southern edge of Albuquerque. Detective Morrison had tracked 3 of the remaining 4 crew members to a single location, a double-wide trailer that had been converted into a makeshift safe house. The operation was coordinated. 12 state police officers, including Sergeant Morales, plus Ethan and Atlas in a support role. Their job was perimeter security, watching for runners while the tactical team made entry. It should have been simple. It wasn't. The entry team breached the front door at 4:47 a.m. using a battering ram and flashbang, grenades. The noise was tremendous. The metallic crash of the door, the sharp bang of the grenades, the shouted commands of "Police! Search warrant!" Ethan and Atlas were positioned at the rear of the trailer, covering the back door and windows. In the pre-dawn darkness, wearing a borrowed tactical vest marked "Police Observer," Ethan felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with operations. Atlas was in full work mode, his body coiled, his senses hyper-alert. They heard the commotion inside, shouts, crashing furniture, more commands. Then, exactly as Ethan had predicted, the back door exploded open. 2 men burst out, running full sprint toward the perimeter fence. They were both armed, one with a shotgun, one with a pistol. "Runner, 2 runners," Ethan shouted into his borrowed radio. The lead runner, a heavy-set man in his 30s, saw Ethan and raised the shotgun. There was no hesitation, no warning. He simply aimed and fired. The blast was deafening. Ethan had already moved, dropping and rolling left. The shot pattern tore through the air where he'd been standing, shredding the chain-link fence behind him. "Atlas, fast!" The command was sharp, immediate. Atlas launched like a missile, covering 30 feet in seconds. The second runner, the one with the pistol, tried to turn and fire at the incoming dog. He was too slow. Atlas hit him at full speed, his jaws clamping onto the man's gun arm. The impact drove the runner to the ground, the pistol flying from his grip. Atlas maintained his hold, his powerful neck shaking, ensuring the threat was neutralized. The first runner, the one with the shotgun, racked another shell and swung the weapon toward Atlas. Ethan didn't think. He acted. He was on his feet, closing the distance, his movements fluid and precise. The runner saw him coming and tried to adjust his aim, but Ethan was already inside the weapon's arc. His left hand grabbed the shotgun's barrel, pushing it skyward. His right fist drove forward in a devastating short punch to the runner's solar plexus. The air exploded from the man's lungs. Before he could recover, Ethan had executed a textbook weapon retention technique, wrenching the shotgun free and tossing it far out of reach. The runner, gasping for air, tried to throw a punch. Ethan caught the arm, pivoted, and executed a hip throw that sent the man crashing to the ground. A knee to the back, a wrist lock, and it was over. "Down! Stay down!" Ethan commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. Backup officers arrived seconds later, cuffing both runners. "Clear," came the call from inside the trailer. The third suspect had surrendered without incident. Morales approached, her expression a mixture of professional disapproval and grudging respect. "Mr. Cross, you were supposed to be in a support role. They shot at me first," Ethan pointed out reasonably. "I was just supporting myself." Despite herself, Morales cracked a smile. "Get Atlas checked out. Make sure he's okay." Ethan moved to where Atlas was being released by his handler. The dog trotted over, his tail wagging, completely uninjured. Ethan knelt, checking him over carefully, then scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," he murmured. "Very good boy." As dawn broke over Albuquerque, painting the desert sky in shades of pink and gold, the operation concluded. 7 of the 8 crew members were now in custody. The 8th, a low-level member, had fled the state and would be picked up within days. The terror campaign targeting K-9 officers was over. Detective Morrison approached Ethan as the scene was being secured. "Mr. Cross, I need to say something." "Go ahead." "I was wrong about you. You're not just a civilian playing hero. You're the real deal." Ethan shook his head. "I just have training and a very good partner." "It's more than that," Morrison insisted. "You have something that can't be taught. You have courage, real courage, the kind that shows up when it's needed, no questions asked." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. As the sun rose fully, bathing the scene in warm light, he looked at Atlas and smiled. They'd done it again, made a difference, stopped bad people from hurting good people, and that, Ethan thought, was enough. 3 weeks later, Ethan sat in a courtroom in Albuquerque, watching as Cutter Wolf was sentenced. The courtroom was packed. Officers in dress uniforms, victims from previous attacks, family members, and media. The attention made Ethan uncomfortable, but he'd promised Maya he'd be there, so he sat in the back row, Atlas lying quietly at his feet. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, read the charges: attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, aggravated assault, armed robbery, conspiracy, and half a dozen other counts. Each charge carried years, and they were being stacked consecutively, not concurrently. "Mr. Wolf," the judge said, her voice hard as granite, "you and your crew engaged in a calculated campaign of terror targeting law enforcement officers. You showed no mercy, no remorse, and no regard for human life. You killed a police K-9 and seriously injured multiple officers. Society must be protected from individuals like you." Cutter stood, his injured arm in a cast, his face impassive. But Ethan, watching carefully, could see the defeat in his eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow realization that his life was effectively over. "I sentence you to 45 years in the New Mexico State Penitentiary without possibility of parole for 30 years. A collective exhalation moved through the courtroom. Maya, sitting in the front row in her dress uniform, closed her eyes and let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. One by one, the other crew members were sentenced, varying terms based on their level of involvement, but all substantial. Dex Wolf, who had cooperated fully, received the lightest sentence, 15 years with possibility of parole after 7. When the proceedings concluded, Maya made her way through the crowd to where Ethan stood. She was walking without a limp now, though she still moved carefully, protecting her healing ribs. Ranger was at her side, his tail wagging when he spotted Atlas. "It's really over," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's over," Ethan confirmed. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there that night. If you'd just driven past, minded your own business." "But I didn't," Ethan said gently. "I was there. Atlas was there. And you're okay. Because of you." Ethan shook his head. "Because of a lot of things. Your training, your courage, Ranger's loyalty. And yes, maybe Atlas and I helped too. But you survived because you're a fighter, Maya. Don't forget that." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "I'm putting you in for a civilian commendation, both you and Atlas." "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is," Maya interrupted firmly. "You need to understand something, Ethan. You saved my life. You saved Ranger's life. You stopped a crew that had been terrorizing law enforcement for months. That deserves recognition." Ethan wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes and knew it would be pointless. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun was bright and warm. Ethan and Maya stood together, their dogs sitting side by side, watching the crowds disperse. "What's next for you?" Maya asked. "Back to your road trip? Texas to visit your sister?" "Actually," Ethan said, "I've been thinking about staying in New Mexico for a while." Maya's eyebrows rose. "Really?" Detective Morrison mentioned that the state police are looking for K-9 trainers, consultants to help with tactics and handler development. Ethan scratched Atlas behind the ears. "Turns out, Atlas and I aren't quite ready to fully retire yet." Maya's smile was radiant. "That would be amazing. We could use someone with your experience. And honestly, I'd like having you around." "Yeah?" "Yeah, you and Atlas. You're good people." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their dogs. Ranger had rolled onto his back, and Atlas was gently play-bowing, the universal dog signal for "let's be friends." "They've got the right idea," Maya said. "Fresh start, new beginning." "I like the sound of that," Ethan agreed. As they walked toward the parking lot, two warriors who had found each other in the darkness and forged a bond in violence and survival, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe he wasn't broken after all. Maybe there was still purpose in his life. Maybe this was what healing looked like. 2 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, the New Mexico State Police held a ceremony at their headquarters in Santa Fe. The parking lot had been transformed into an outdoor venue, with rows of chairs facing a small stage decorated with American flags and law enforcement insignias. Media cameras lined the back, and a crowd of over 200 people filled the seats. Officers, civilians, and local dignitaries. Ethan sat in the front row, deeply uncomfortable in the dress shirt and tie Maya had insisted he wear. Atlas sat at his feet, wearing a brand-new tactical collar with a small American flag patch. On stage, the chief of police, a distinguished man named Robert Chen, stood at a podium. "We're here today to honor extraordinary courage," Chief Chen began. 3 months ago, at a remote gas station, a violent criminal crew nearly succeeded in murdering one of our officers and her K-9 partner. They would have succeeded if not for the intervention of a civilian who refused to look away when someone needed help. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ethan Cross is a retired Navy SEAL who had no obligation to put himself in harm's way. But when he witnessed a law enforcement officer under attack, he didn't hesitate. Using his military training and his K-9 partner Atlas, he neutralized 4 armed suspects, prevented multiple murders, and broke open a case that led to the arrest of an entire criminal organization. The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan felt his face flush. "Mr. Cross, would you please join me on stage?" Ethan stood, Atlas immediately coming to heel, and they walked to the stage together. As they climbed the steps, Ethan's eyes found Maya in the front row. She was in her dress uniform, grinning widely, giving him an encouraging thumbs up. Chief Chen shook Ethan's hand, then turned to address the crowd. "It is my honor to present Ethan Cross with the New Mexico State Police Citizens Medal of Valor, the highest civilian honor we can bestow." He opened a wooden presentation case, revealing a silver medal on a blue and gold ribbon. He placed it around Ethan's neck. "And for Atlas, a military working dog who served 3 combat deployments and continued his service by protecting a civilian community, we present the K-9 Medal of Courage." An officer approached with a smaller medal designed to attach to a dog's collar. Atlas sat perfectly still as it was fastened, his tail wagging slowly. The applause was thunderous. Chief Chen leaned close to Ethan. "We need to get a photograph. Stand there with Atlas, and Officer Rodriguez will join you." Maya walked onto the stage, Ranger at her side. The 4 of them, 2 humans, 2 dogs, stood together as cameras flashed. But what happened next wasn't planned. Ranger, seeing Atlas, broke his formal sit and walked over to his friend. Atlas's tail began wagging enthusiastically, and the 2 dogs touched noses, then sat side by side, their bodies pressed together, presenting a united front. The crowd laughed, then began applauding again. It was a moment of pure, unscripted joy. 2 warriors, 2 partners, 2 friends acknowledging their bond. Maya looked at Ethan, tears in her eyes. "They know," she whispered. "They know they saved each other." "Yeah," Ethan agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "They do." After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and the media interviews concluded, Ethan and Maya stood together in the parking lot. Their dogs were lying in the shade of a tree, Atlas's head resting on Ranger's back, both of them completely relaxed. "So," Maya said, "you ready to start your new job next week? Head K-9 consultant for the entire state?" "Ready as I'll ever be," Ethan said, "though I'm pretty sure Atlas is going to be doing most of the actual teaching." Maya laughed. "He's already a better trainer than half our instructors." They stood in companionable silence, watching their dogs sleep in the warm autumn sun. "Thank you," Maya said quietly, "for everything." "Thank you," Ethan replied, "for reminding me why this all matters. If you're watching this story, you've just witnessed something that happens more often than you might think. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because they can't stand by when someone needs help. Ethan Cross isn't unique because he's a Navy SEAL. He's unique because when faced with a choice, to drive away or to intervene, he chose to act. That choice is available to all of us every single day. But this story isn't just about human courage. It's about the bond between handler and K-9, between warrior and partner. Atlas and Ranger represent thousands of military and law enforcement working dogs who serve alongside their human partners, often at great personal risk. These dogs don't understand medals or recognition. They understand loyalty. They understand duty. And they understand love. the kind of unconditional, protective love that makes them throw themselves into danger to protect the humans they've bonded with. Every day, K-9 officers and their dogs patrol our communities. They search for explosives, track missing persons, detect narcotics, and yes, protect their handlers from violence. They do this not for treats or toys, but because service is literally bred into their bones. And every day, veterans like Ethan Cross come home from war, carrying wounds both visible and invisible, trying to find purpose in a world that suddenly feels too loud, too fast, too confusing. Many of them have K-9 partners who transition home with them, offering not just companionship, but a living connection to a life of service and meaning. This story is a tribute to all of them, to the operators who train endlessly for moments they hope never come, to the K-9s who serve without question or complaint, to the law enforcement officers who put on the uniform every day, knowing that today might be the day someone tries to kill them, and to the ordinary citizens who, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, find within themselves the courage to act. What would you do if you witnessed an officer under attack? Would you call 911 and hope help arrives in time? Would you film it on your phone? Or would you, if you had the training, the ability, the means, step forward and become part of the solution? We hope you never have to answer that question. But if you do, remember Ethan and Atlas. Remember Maya and Ranger. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite fear, because someone needs help and you have the ability to give it. These dogs, military working dogs, police K-9s, service animals, they don't just protect us, they heal us, they ground us. They remind us that loyalty, courage, and service aren't just abstract concepts. They're lived realities, embodied in fur and teeth and wagging tails. They are heroes with 4 paws, and sometimes they walk among us, quiet and unassuming, waiting for the moment they're needed. When that moment comes, they don't hesitate. Neither should we. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Was it Atlas's protection of Maya, Ranger's loyalty, or the moment the 2 K-9s became friends? We read every comment. God bless, and see you in the next story.